Little is actually known about Nero's origins except that he was raised in the city of Fortuna and as an orphan was taken in by Kyrie's and Kratos' family. Nero got his name from the black blanket in which he was found, and Cygnus himself made multiple references that Nero may be a descendant with Sparta's blood. While he was growing up, Nero was taken in by the Order of the Swords, which was a religious group that worshipped the Dark Knight Sparta. On the day of the Festival of Blades, while Nero was watching his friend Kyrie perform, he witnessed the attempted assassination of the Order's leader by the demon hunter Dante. Nero engaged Dante, and it was during their battle that Nero's injured arm suddenly healed, and it was discovered that he had access to demonic powers. Using his newly found powers, Nero was able to defeat Dante and force him into a retreat. Nero was then ordered by his friend Kratos to pursue Dante, who was seen heading towards the Order's headquarters. While on his way to reach the Order's headquarters, Nero would run into Agnes, the Order's chief alchemist, and Agnes revealed that it was he who had created the Hellgates and was using them to summon demons for which he needed for his experiments. While in Agnes's lab, Nero would discover the broken sword Yamato, which once belonged to Dante's twin brother Virgil, and using his own demonic powers was actually able to repair the weapon, thereby unlocking an even greater power within himself. Using Nero's friend Kyrie as bait, Cygnus lured Nero to a giant statue named Savior, and managed to defeat Nero and take the Yamato sword to form the core of the Savior, then absorb Nero into the Savior's core itself. Later on, Dante would recover the Yamato sword and would manage to force the Yamato sword through the outer shell of the Savior, which awoken Nero from within the Savior's heart. With Dante battling the Savior from the outside, and Nero battling Sanctus from the inside, the two managed to destroy the Savior once and for all. To solidify their new alliance, Dante allowed Nero to keep the Yamato sword, and in their final moments together, Nero asked if Dante would ever see him again, and Dante simply vaguely waved back as an answer. During Dante's much later life, he would be lured to an old French museum looking for a demonic artifact, and it was there that he would meet the young demon hunter Lucia. At that time, Lucia's past was surrounded in mystery, but what was known about her was that she was raised by her mother Montier, who asked her to bring Dante to their land in order to ask for his help to stop a man named Arius from releasing Argosex the Chaos into the human world. But to do this, Arius needed to collect 4 demonic artifacts in order to achieve his goal. As Dante and Lucia divided onto separate paths to retrieve the artifacts, he would eventually run into Arius himself, who revealed that Lucia was nothing more but one of his creations that he had rejected because in her eyes, he was a defect. It was during this time that she would be found by her adopted mother Montier, and after successfully managed to obtaining the final demonic artifact and pass them on to Dante, who she would ask then to give to her mother Montier, she would then go to confront Arius himself. Though she would fight bravely, she would be soundly defeated until Dante would appear to rescue her and defeat Arius in the process. The two would meet up at the doorway to the demon world, where Lucia asked Dante to kill her, stating that she was nothing more than a demon who deserved to die. As Lucia began to cry, Dante stated that devils never cry, and with those final words, Dante would enter the demon world alone. However, as Dante entered the demon world, Lucia would then be attacked by a now mutated Arius, and despite him growing immensely powerful, Lucia was able to defeat him and kill Arius once and for all. The last time we see Lucia, she's standing inside Dante's shop flipping his signature coin when she suddenly hears a bike pull up outside, believing it to be Dante, who has somehow returned from the demon world. Well, what's up again there, guys? Brian here at 3CR, here to present my 4th versus series matchup of this year, and to go into a quick explanation as for why this one took me so long to get out. For starters, I couldn't get the footage I needed because I didn't own Devil May Cry 4 Special Edition at the time, and I've recently been promoted at my current job, really giving me twice as many hours as I had before, which has made it really difficult for me to have time to do some research and proper editing and recording. So, with that out of the way, let's jump into this matchup as we pit the man with the demonic arm, Nero, against the creation of Arius, Lucia, and we will begin by comparing them physically. Nero is an 18-year-old young man standing about 6 feet tall, and although his official profile states that he is a half-human, half-demon hybrid, I don't believe that Nero carries many properties of a demon. During his upbringing, it is clear that Nero has kept himself in prime physical condition, capable of keeping up with the movements of demons, and thanks to his demonic arm that Nero now has, it does seem to have allowed his body to perform special physical traits far beyond that of a normal human. However, I won't say by much. Due to Nero's upbringing and his training within the Order of the Swords to combat the likes of demons, his physical build would have been focused on enhancing his strength and durability and stamina instead of his speed and flexibility. In short, Nero was a very strength and power-oriented fighter, and his physical focus was based on that notion. And though Nero himself doesn't really contain any real weaknesses that stand out to me, he does have a limited amount of durability, and if he takes too much damage over time, just like anyone in his physical class, he will eventually go down. Lucia is a young, half-human, half-demon hybrid in her early 20s, standing 5'7", and is in great shape, although I'm not willing to state that she has reached her physical prime just yet. Like most human-demon hybrids, she has been granted some superhuman qualities, though her career Arius did state that Lucia was a defect, which is why she was discarded at a very young age, meaning that Lucia would have been forced to build herself up as a combatant. Her durability has not been established in any source, though I firmly believe that Lucia would have been at this point in her life on the same physical level as Dante during the events of Devil May Cry 3, however, she would have built herself up in a very different way. Despite being mostly demon, her lightweight build made it very difficult for her to perform power blows while in her human form, forcing her to have to rely on her speed and flexibility to work around her lack of power during combat. However, when Lucia was able to transform into her demon form, all of her physical feats were greatly enhanced, which then would have allowed her to take more damage and apply greater strength within her strikes, even if this form only lasted for a limited amount of time. In short, Lucia is more than capable of holding her own against just about any opponent, but compared to other hybrids in her class, she is clearly not the strongest member of this breed. As physical combatants, Nero and Lucia are very capable fighters but have applied their focuses to very different physical departments. But one element that I feel must be addressed is their physical constructions. If it is to believe that Nero is in fact Virgil's son, then this would make Nero mostly human with only about 25% of his blood being demon, which means that he would have very strict limits to what he could actually achieve, since humans are always significantly weaker than demons. While Lucia, being a creation of Arius, would certainly be at least 75% demon, with a little 25% human thrown in there to give her a basic form. But despite this would not give Lucia the automatic edge over Nero due to the fact that she is still very young and in my opinion has not yet reached her physical prime as a demon-human hybrid. And Nero has proven time and time again that he is more than capable of keeping up with full-fledged demons along with demon-human hybrids like Dante. What ultimately decides this factor in my eyes is their combative focus's potential. Because of Nero's very limited use of demonic properties, Nero had to base his entire combative style on building a very strong offense while being able to take a great deal of damage, while Lucia, being a female demon hybrid, had to choose to develop her speed and flexibility to make her a much harder opponent to hit. And on top of that, Lucia does have the use of her Devil Trigger form, which enhances all of her physical capabilities, including the properties she has not chosen to focus on, meaning that her own strength and durability would be greatly enhanced, even if it is for a short period of time. And though Nero too does possess a Devil Trigger of his own, I personally believe that it operates somewhat differently than Lucia, which is something I will elaborate on later on. In conclusion, Nero without question would be able to keep up with someone like Lucia in both her basic form and her demon form, but Lucia, with all of her physical capabilities, would certainly be able to match Nero's durability and strength once she is in her demon form, and in terms of speed and flexibility would certainly exceed Nero's own physical limits in those departments, even if it is for a short period of time. And it is for these reasons that I'm giving the very slight edge to Lucia in physical capabilities. Though Nero was mostly human and possessed a very limited connection to demonic powers, in the short amount of time that Nero had begun really taking advantages of his new demonic arm dubbed the Devil Bringer, he became quite familiar with its abilities and limitations in order to increase its effectiveness in combat. The Devil Bringer arm, in all honesty, is really just a glorified grappling hook. With the use of the Devil Bringer arm, Nero could grab enemies at a distance and pull them close to him, or vice versa, could grab enemies and pull himself to them. He could also use his arm to rip demons apart or grab an enemy and bang them across the ground like a rag doll. Nero could also use the demonic powers of his arm to channel it through his Blue Rose revolver, firing a demonically charged round. However, this technique does require time to charge and can only fire one shot at a time. Now, as opposed to my last match when I pit Nero against Virgil, since Nero does possess the powers of the Yamato sword, having this weapon did grant Nero access to a Devil Trigger form. However, as opposed to others who possess a Devil Trigger ability, Nero cannot change his physical form, but instead it allows him to tap into the full powers that his Devil Bringer arm possesses, and using this power, it allows him to use the demonic essence within his blood bonded to the powers of the Yamato sword alongside his Red Queen sword. And when firing his Blue Rose revolver, he can summon laser swords alongside every round he fires. Though I do want to state that while using this version of the Devil Trigger form, it does not enhance any of his physical properties like strength, durability, or speed. It simply allows him to attack opponent twice with one blow, making it a very useful ability in combat, but very limited in its time span. The only real special ability that Lucia had in her arsenal was the use of a Devil Trigger form as well. However, apart from Nero's, her form was more similar to someone like Dante and Virgil's Devil Trigger forms, in which it allowed her to release the full supernatural potential within herself, and in this form, Lucia's physical and magical attributes were greatly amplified. And it also gave her access to special combative feats while also granting her a healing factor, enabling her to recover from damage and gaining stamina in the process. Apart from someone like Dante's Devil Trigger demonic form, Lucia would transform into a angel-bird hybrid sort of thing, I would say, with her whole body being covered in white feathers, which also enabled her to have the ability to fly, making her a much harder target to hit. She was also able to shoot these feathers at a very long range and could fire several different projectiles all at once that could hone onto her opponent's exact position. Although this ability could be extremely effective, it could only last for a limited amount of time, and once the transformation was done, she would be left vulnerable and open for attacks. However, this would only last for a moment. This verdict is pretty straightforward to call, however, I would like to go in depth so that there is no confusion to my next statement. When comparing the use of their Devil Trigger forms, I would like to go on record by stating that in terms of overall power, Lucia's Devil Trigger form would be slightly more powerful due to the fact that Nero's Devil Trigger form only allows him to tap into the full potential of his powers and allows him to attack twice with every strike, while Lucia's form allows her to embody the full potential of her demonic powers. Tapping in and embodying are two completely different things, or Kaioken versus Super Saiyan for you Dragon Ball Z fans. What ultimately tips this overall category in one's favor is Nero's use of his Devil Bringer arm. Nero has proven that he can use his Devil Bringer arm as an effective tool alone without needing to rely on the powers of his Devil Trigger form, and there is no doubt that this would be an effective weapon against Lucia in either her basic or demonic forms. And also, unfortunately for Lucia, she doesn't really seem to have a solid response to something like this ability. The Devil Bringer arm has proven to be such a game changer in the midst of combat that it is proven to even be very effective against someone like Dante. And though Dante has clearly found a way to get around this technique most of the time, he couldn't avoid it all the time. And as an overall combatant, Dante completely eclipses Lucia in every single category. And it is for these reasons that I give Nero the edge at special abilities. Nero will be bringing 3 physical weapons of his own into this matchup. However, unlike my previous matchup involving Nero, He will have access to a fourth weapon at his disposal, however this will only be accessible when Nero decides to activate his Devil Trigger form. The first of his main weapons being his main long-range weapon dubbed the Blue Rose Revolver. The Blue Rose Revolver is a uniquely designed revolver with an over and under barrel style, and this design allows it to fire 2 magnum rounds with each pull of the trigger. Nero can also use his own demonic energy to charge up a shot with the Blue Rose Revolver, allowing each round fired to cause even more damage. Nero's main sword was dubbed the Red Queen. It is a customized version of the blades used by the Order of the Swords and was designed by Agnes. It's not a devil arm, but its unique construction makes it just as powerful. It also has been specifically customized for a motorcycle-like gear shift, which when pulled sprays a flammable propellant across the blade and opponent, greatly increasing the power of its blows. Nero's third weapon is dubbed the Devil Bringer arm. The Devil Bringer is Nero's right arm and its physical manifestation of his own demonic powers. The arm possesses superhuman strength, which can also manifest through a much larger spectral arm, and this arm can do feats of supernatural strength, which Nero often uses to his advantage when fighting demons. Dante himself admitted that in terms of sheer brute strength, Nero might even be stronger than him. In combat, the arm is mostly used to pull enemies towards Nero or him to them, and he can also use the Devil Bringer arm in up-close combat to punch enemies or rip them apart. His final weapon is the legendary sword Yamato, which once belonged to Dante's twin brother Virgil. Though this is not a weapon that he physically carries on him, since by the end of Devil May Cry 4, Nero absorbed the Yamato sword within himself, allowing him to only use it when he chooses to activate his Devil Trigger form. And though Nero has used the sword with some levels of success, he clearly can't, nor do I believe will ever master the use of the Yamato sword as much as Dante's twin brother Virgil once did. Lucia will be bringing 3 different weapons into this particular contest, which all range from long, medium, and short ranges. Her main close-range weapon were a pair of blades named the Cutlassers. The Cutlassers were 45-inch blades from the handle to the tip of the blades and were sharpened like elephant tusks, curved in opposite directions. They also have standard speed and range and striking power, and Lucia holds these weapons in a reverse grip, which allows her to incorporate quick strikes alongside her melee kicks in a highly effective attacking sequence. For her long range, she carries an infinite supply of throwing daggers, which have been created to be very strong against demons, and it has been shown that when she uses these daggers while in air, it allows her to hover briefly. Her final weapons are an infinite supply of explosives named Cranky Bombs. Cranky Bombs function like mines or grenades in which they can either be set or thrown, and although these bombs have a high rate of firepower, due to their weight and size, they're not very accurate when thrown. This one's also pretty obvious to call. Between the two of them, it is clear that Nero has the superior set of armament. Lucia has proven that she can use her very limited set of weapons to great effect, but compared to Nero's range of weapons, they're all just so basic. If we were to do a side-by-side comparison, Nero's Red Queen sword is 3 times as thick and can do 3 times the damage than Lucia's twin Cutlassers blades can do combined. Nero's primary long-range weapon, the Blue Rose Revolver, can fire 2 rounds at a time, while Lucia is stuck throwing basic knives, and unfortunately Lucia really has no answer to Nero's Devil Bringer arm, which can work alongside both Nero's Red Queen sword and Blue Rose Revolver. And in a contest like this, I find it very unlikely that Lucia will be able to put her Cranky Bombs to any real use, due to their size and the fact that they blink and make a sound, meaning that Nero will have no difficulties at all evading their small explosions. Bottom line, Nero's and Lucia's range of weapons does work very effectively for their specific combative styles, but Nero's weapons are far more effective and sophisticated and carry far more combative might and uses, and it is for these reasons that I'm giving Nero the definitive edge in weapons. Like all my previous matchups involving sword wielders, I will be using Star Wars lightsaber fighting forms to better describe their martial and tactical approaches in combat. And with that out of the way, Nero was a highly trained combatant, so much so that it was believed that Nero was considered to be one of the best fighters within the Order of Swords. However, due to his youthful personality and his need to dominate any opponent regardless of whether he was facing one opponent or swarms of enemies, Nero's fighting style had to be based on the notion that the best defense was an overwhelming offense. The prime two fighting forms that Nero would clearly specialize in would be Forms 1 Shicho and Form 7 Juyo, with a Makashi mentality of only using the blade with one arm. Shicho is the most basic fighting form, with its wide sweeping strikes making it the prime form to deal with multiple opponents at once, while Juyo is the most demanding of all fighting forms and relies on completely dominating your opponent with overwhelming offense. Juyo also plays off the emotions of the user and requires the user to attack with passion. This form also plays off the notion that one must enjoy the thrill of battle, and this mentality perfectly describes Nero. He either blasts you with his Blue Rose revolver, cuts you to pieces with his Red Queen sword, or literally pounds you into the ground and rips you apart with his Devil Bringer arm. I'm even willing to go so far as to state that out of all the main set of characters throughout the Devil May Cry franchise, Nero was by far the most aggressive. Nero's main prime weakness within his own fighting maneuvers and tactics was that his particular fighting style did not provide any sort of defense, but instead had to rely on evasion. He has shown that he can have some difficulty when attempting to engage fast-moving opponents, whether he was trying to shoot them down with his Blue Rose revolver, cut them down up close with his Red Queen sword, or attempt to get a grip on them with his Devil Bringer arm. And though Nero's fighting style and approach in combat was very straightforward and effective, its overwhelming strikes and lack of any kind of defense did make Nero somewhat predictable at times, which was shown during Nero's second fight against Dante. While Nero was able to surprise Dante during their first fight, once Dante knew all of Nero's combative capabilities, he could easily develop maneuvers that caught Nero off guard, leading to his defeat. Being raised as a member of the Vida Mali clan gave Lucia a very rich environment to hone her combative skills, as the clan was known to be an order of guardian priests and devil hunters from whom which human-demon hybrids with special powers like herself could grow. Lucia's main combat skill set allowed her to be perfectly capable of fighting at both long and close ranges without sacrificing combat effectiveness. She used a mixture of quick jabs, swift kicks alongside her sword strikes, proving that Lucia had a high caliber of applying the use of weapons within her fighting maneuvers. She also took advantage of all of her demonic capabilities, incorporating her ability to jump much higher than the average human and capable of moving her body much faster, making Lucia a very difficult opponent to hit. And having her combative skills focus on relying on using speed and flexibility, along with using her entire body instead of relying simply on her weapons to contend with multiple opponents at once, as well as single opponents. Lucia would have been a prime practitioner of Forms 1 Shicho, which was the fundamental basic fighting form to help combat multiple opponents at once, and Form 4 Ataru, which relied on using speed strikes in a series of jumps and flips within her maneuvers to make herself as hard of a target to pin down as possible. If Lucia's use of twin-bladed weapons, she would have been trained in the use of a Jar-Kai fighting style, which Form 4 Ataru does supply specialized training for. As a tactician, Lucia was very smart at paying attention to her opponent's attacks and being able to recognize openings to exploit. However, due to her preferred fighting style and her chosen fighting maneuvers, she was unable to incorporate any serious amounts of power behind her strikes and instead relied on turning her fights into battles of attrition and wearing her opponents down over time instead of trying to take them down as fast as she could. But if this technique failed, then Lucia would find herself getting into trouble very quickly, as she doesn't really have any sort of effective fallback options. As fighters and tacticians, there are two key factors that will come into play when determining who will gain the overall edge in this category: how a combatant will think and how they can perform. In terms of their tactical mindsets, Lucia would clearly have the edge over Nero, as his simple-minded offensive approach lacks any kind of defense, and he would certainly leave plenty of gaps that a fast-moving opponent like Lucia would easily be able to take advantage of. However, Nero's focus on durability and strength means that he would have a much easier time taking all the hits that Lucia can dish out at him, and though he would certainly have a much harder time pinning Lucia down, when he finally does connect, he would immediately force Lucia onto the defense, and Lucia with her lightweight build would certainly have a much harder time recovering. From that point on, the only chance that Lucia will have at being able to take the offense again is if she activates her Devil Trigger form. And though for the initial first few moments that she uses this, she would be able to match Nero's overwhelming offense in this form, I have no doubt that Nero would be able to withstand whatever Lucia's new heightened offense would bring until it expires. And even if I was to compare their methods in terms of a hit ratio, in which I would place it at a 6-to-1 hit ratio, Lucia may be able to deliver more hits, but the one hit that Nero delivers on her would do far more damage than all 6 of Lucia's strikes combined. I would like to go on record by saying that Lucia's combative skill set and approach are exactly the types that one could use to defeat Nero, as Dante was able to apply such an approach to defeat him in their second engagement. The problem is that Lucia just cannot apply these techniques to the same effectiveness as Dante. Lucia would ultimately need about 20 minutes to defeat Nero using her approach to wear him down, but once this fight got to the 5-minute mark, Nero would get tired of all the constant little slashes and would crank up the intensity of his attacks and counterattack Lucia's offense, forcing her into her back foot, and would begin smashing down on what little defense Lucia could put up until she goes down. And it is for these reasons that I am giving Nero the edge in martial skills and battle tactics. A fight between Nero and Lucia would be a very straightforward engagement, and though Nero and Lucia are certainly more than prepared to engage each other and put up a good fight, at the end of the day, only Nero is in a much better position to win the fight. Despite Lucia having a slightly physical edge and being the far more sophisticated battle tactician, these advantages would not be enough for her to deal with Nero's raw, ruthless aggression offense. Nero has proven that he is more than capable of challenging or defeating opponents that clearly have the physical, tactical, martial, and power advantage over him. And though Lucia is a very formidable fighter and has proven that she too can fight her way out of very difficult situations, she possesses nowhere near the overall combative effectiveness on par with characters like Dante or Virgil. Lucia's greatest weakness in this fight is that between the two of them, Lucia's recovery system and offensive might are completely outclassed by Nero. Lucia ultimately loses this fight for nearly the same reasons that Nero would lose a one-time engagement against either Dante or Virgil. Despite Nero's overwhelming raw aggression, Dante and Virgil can deal with everything Nero can throw at them and counterattack with even greater offensive might. Virgil's entire combative style is based off of evading an opponent's attacks, then immediately counterattacking faster than the opponent can react. And Dante's style of fighting is based off of working through an opponent's attacks, then counterattacking at an exposed opening. And the madder Nero gets, the more mistakes he will make, and openings that he will provide for Dante and Virgil to take advantage of this. Lucia simply cannot achieve this level of performance, and though she certainly would be able to work around Nero's offense at first and get some early good hits in, that would not be enough to either stagger Nero nor force him on the defensive. He would simply withstand Lucia's offense and counterattack with his own, forcing her onto her defense immediately. And with a combination of Nero's Red Queen and Devil Bringer arm, there is a solid possibility that after a period of time, Nero's offense could become so overwhelmingly powerful that there is nothing Lucia could do to stop this, even making Lucia's own Devil Trigger form useless, proving that the Devil Bringer arm can be just as effective against full-fledged demons as it can be against humanoid forms, and eventually Nero's offense would wear down Lucia's stamina, break through her defenses, and she would be cut down. This fight would play out in a very similar fashion to the lightsaber duel between Anakin Skywalker and Asajj Ventress from the Star Wars Attack of the Clones animated series, with Nero filling in for Anakin and Lucia taking the role of Ventress. Now let's say this engagement takes place in the main opera house of the Order of the Sword's headquarters in Fortuna. The fight would begin with the two of them standing about 20 yards apart from each other, and they would both open up with their projectile weapons first, with Nero firing off his Blue Rose revolver and Lucia throwing her infinite supply of knives. And this really wouldn't change anything, as Nero would be able to shoot down all the knives thrown at him, and Lucia would be able to easily dodge all the bullets fired in her direction. The two would then engage each other with their swords, and for the first initial few moments of the contest, Lucia's Jarkai variation of Ataru would certainly be able to work around Nero's straightforward Juyo power offense, and she would begin landing a good number of hits and light slashes alongside some kicks within her maneuvers. But this would not be very effective against Nero, and would come off as nothing more but annoying to him at first. After a couple more minutes, Nero would then really start getting agitated and would begin applying more power into his strikes, and after a few more attempts, he would eventually connect with Lucia, knocking her back a good number of yards away. Nero would then take this time to pump up his Red Queen sword to apply more speed and power within his blows, and then he would then jump at Lucia to re-engage. Lucia would dodge the first strike, but would immediately be forced into the defensive, with Nero's strikes coming faster and more powerful than before. Lucia then attempts to increase the distance between her and Nero, so she jumps back, but as she lands, Nero fires off a charged demonic power round from his Blue Rose revolver, knocking Lucia back to the ground once again. As Lucia recovers, she sees that Nero is beginning to charge at her immediately and realizes that she cannot match Nero's offense in her current form. So, she decides to activate her Devil Trigger and counters Nero's charge with her own, and for the first time in the battle, she actually manages to knock Nero back and follows up with a combination of slashes at Nero, forcing him back. While still in her Devil Trigger form, she would follow up with this by jumping a good number of feet away to increase the distance, and would immediately take flight. However, Nero would simply look up at Lucia and would smirk and say at her, "Well, that's not going to help you at all." Nero would then reach out with his Devilbringer arm and slam Lucia back down to the ground and start banging her across the ground like a rag doll. Nero would then follow up with a combination of grabs and throws alongside strikes from his Red Queen sword, and after a few more powerful combos, Lucia will have taken too much damage and she would be knocked back into her human form, exhausted. Lucia at this point would attempt to run away, realizing that she has taken too much damage and cannot match Nero's offense. However, Nero would catch up with Lucia and would force her into a corner so she cannot escape. Going on to the offense for the final time, Nero would then activate his own Devil Trigger, now delivering even more powerful strikes at twice the rate as before, forcing Lucia to simply hold her blades in a defensive stance as Nero delivers blow after blow after blow. But eventually, Nero's Red Queen would smash through Lucia's blades, destroying them in the process, and would cleave Lucia completely in half, ending her life. And thus, I declare Nero, the man with the demonic arm, the winner. And that's a wrap. I hope you guys really enjoyed watching this particular Versus Series matchup, and please share your thoughts with me in the comments down below. Do you agree that Nero's offense would be too much for Lucia to handle, or do you think that Lucia could pull a trick out of her hat that might be able to outmaneuver and catch Nero off guard, leading to her victory? Please share your opinions with me in the comments down below once again, and if you like this Versus Series matchup, feel free to like, comment down below, and please subscribe to check in my future videos. And going into my next Versus Series matchup, I really need your guys' help. If you would be so kind, feel free to type in the words ultimate weapon or no ultimate weapon for the next Versus Series matchup. And trust me, once you see the preview of my next Versus Series matchup, I'm sure some of you guys will be super excited and will understand why I need your guys' decision in choosing which weapons these fighters will use. So without further ado, here is a preview of my next Versus Series matchup.